Hi, and welcome back to the Save It for Parts channel. Today we're coming to you from London, England, where we're staying in this lovely little narrowboat on the British canals. Unfortunately, we won't actually be taking the boat out on the canals, we're just staying on it as part of an Airbnb lodging. When I'm traveling, I often look for boats on Airbnb listings because I'm used to boats, I'm familiar with them, I enjoy them. Now, boats can also be a little bit cheaper than a traditional apartment or house, partly because they're a little bit quirky, and some of the amenities and systems and utilities don't work quite the same as people might expect. If you're willing to put up with a few little unique quirks and jump through a few hoops for things like taking a shower, a boat can be a remarkably good option and a good value for your stay. We really enjoyed our time on the Narrowboat Spectrum in London, and I would recommend it to anybody that's looking for a cool place to stay while they're in the UK. Here's just a quick tour of the interior of this narrowboat, starting at the rear deck. We've got the main entrance hatch going down into the cabin. On our right we have some of the utilities, and on our left we've got a little coal or wood-burning stove. Then there's a small bathroom or head, and then we have the main cabin. This little couch or futon folds out into a double bed. It does take up quite a bit of the cabin when it's folded out. There's a small but pretty full-featured galley, and then we have the well deck up here on the bow of the boat. The rooftop has a solar panel and a nice little garden set up by the owner. As I mentioned, the galley is pretty small, but it does have a 2-burner stovetop, which is just perfect for making a cup of tea in the morning. The decks are also a little small, but there's room at the stern for 2 chairs, and it's a perfect place to hang out and relax. Now, because this is a boat, it does move around a little bit, and it's not always in the same location twice. We were fortunate enough to stay when it was located in a very central part of London, just a 5-minute walk away from 2 major train stations. It was also moored right behind a floating bookstore called Word on the Water, or the London Book Barge. This was a very cool little floating shop, and it even had events almost every night we were there, including comedy acts, book release parties, live music, etc. We were moored in the King's Cross district of London, which is a pretty jumping area. I wasn't quite expecting this much activity and this much liveliness. It was kind of neat. It was a little bit noisy at times, but we did manage to get plenty of sleep because the area does die down at night. In addition to the human wildlife and the people-watching opportunities, we got to see plenty of cool London aquatic wildlife as well. We saw coots, cormorants, a variety of ducks, Canadian geese, and a few other water birds that I'm not really sure what they were. Now, as I mentioned, the narrowboat itself didn't leave the mooring while we were there, and that was in part due to the mooring situation and in part due to some mechanical issues. However, the owner did provide a small plastic dinghy that we were able to row around. So we were able to go up and down the canal, check out some of the other canal boats along the way, and of course dodge some narrowboats that were actually moving around. As with most boats, it's hard for these guys to turn or stop quickly, so a small unpowered boat might technically have the right of way, but should try to get out of the way as much as possible. Hello.
Thank you.
Yeah. The limited space inside the narrowboat did make it a bit of a challenge for Americans with large American luggage, but we managed to make do. For a week's stay, it was just about perfect for 2 people. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are some quirks with living on or renting a boat. The drinking and washing water is somewhat limited. We had an onboard water tank, and we never used it all up, although we also never really knew how much was in the tank, so we were pretty sparing with water. There were several power systems on board. 12-volt power is kind of the default, which comes from the solar panel on the roof and is stored in onboard batteries. This gets bumped up to 120, or since it's the UK, actually 240 volts through an inverter system. And we could use this for charging phones and whatnot, although we didn't want to leave it on all the time or it would just drain the battery. Circling back around to the water system, the engine cooler or heat exchanger was the main source of hot water for showers, so we'd have to start the engine, run it for about half an hour, and then there would be enough hot water for a shower. It's not the quietest thing ever, and as I mentioned, there were some mechanical issues, including a loosely mounted alternator, which you could hear clunking around in the background anytime that you ran the engine. I will say this was a step up from a lot of boats that I've stayed on, and most of the boats I've owned, none of which have had a shower on board. Even though we were out and about on our own expeditions sometimes, the local neighborhood did have some interesting stuff to do. There were a few pubs and restaurants around, there was a grocery store less than 5 minutes away, there was an outdoor theater on the canal which showed nighttime movies, and even some sporting events during the day which became very popular. One of our wanderings in London took us down to the St. Catherine docks, where we saw a variety of other narrowboats, as well as some seagoing vessels. This little harbor is kind of an interface between the Thames River, the ocean, and the canal networks, and so there were a whole variety of boats in here, including this very intricate barge, which is apparently the Queen's personal rowboat. There were also some really cool historic boats in the St. Catherine's dock. I think some of them might be tours or be museums of some sort, but we didn't really have time to investigate fully. All in all, this was a very cool trip to London, a very fun little place to stay, and if you're willing to put up with the few quirks of boat life, I would highly recommend looking for a canal boat on Airbnb, such as the Spectrum that we stayed on. I'm not sure when we'll have the time or money to get back overseas, but I hope to someday explore more of the British Canal network. It's a very cool inland waterway system. I do watch a lot of canal boating vlogs like Cruising the Cut and Foxes Afloat, and I really enjoy seeing some of the scenery, seeing some of the boats, and just experiencing some of that, even if it's secondhand. I hope you've enjoyed this video, even though it wasn't one of my normal build or project videos. I'll probably be putting up a few more travel vlog type videos, maybe show a few more things that we saw while we were overseas, so stay tuned for those. Make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.